Hi, Rob. Thank you so much for joining in this podcast episode. I really appreciate it. How are you doing today?
Hey, my pleasure being here. Great to be here. Doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing absolutely fine. And yeah, the pleasure is mine to have you as a guest in the show. And I'm super excited to have like more discussion on the seeking story and leadership, which is leadership is really close to my heart as well, because I'm managing my team as well. And obviously you have like a decades of experience in the role. So yeah, I love to pick your brain as well. And at the same time, have fun and let our uh, listeners enjoy the show as well.
Sure.
So before we get into the topic, I'd love to know more about yourself. Who is Rob is and how did you end up in like a coaching and consulting business?
Yeah, I got into sales actually completely out of necessity many years ago. I was working as a disc jockey at a radio station,
Mm-hmm.
making minimum wage, and this is back in the mid 1980s. Minimum wage was $3.80 an hour.
Wow.
I was working midnight to 6 a.m. I was living in my parents' basement before it was in vogue. So making obviously very, very little money. And I was doing that 6 days a week. So then I took a full-time job as well at a local golf course. So
Right.
I would work from midnight to 6 a.m. at the radio station, then 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the golf course. And I would do that 5 to 6 days a week. My brother offered me a job selling sporting goods equipment full time. And so I took that with great excitement
Mm-hmm.
to have one job and to get in. I was excited to get into sales because I really thought I could excel in sales.
Yeah.
And that excitement soon turned to frustration when I realized that I didn't know how to influence it. And if you're in a leadership position or if you're in a sales position and you don't know how to influence people, you're in a lot of trouble. There's a lot of trouble there.
Yeah.
So I continued through sales into different sales careers, and I went to work for a company where I brought a gentleman in by the name of Mike Bosworth, who wrote a book called What Great Salespeople Do. He also wrote two other books, one called Customer Centric Selling and one called Solution Selling. And those are two New York Times best-selling books. You might be familiar with Mike Bosworth. Well, I brought Mike Bosworth into a company I was working at to do a 2.5-day workshop for us on sales. And as he was giving that workshop, I thought to myself, that's what I should be doing. I should be doing what he's doing. So I started talking more and more with Mike, and long and short of it is, today, Mike Bosworth and I have done dozens of workshops where we co-talk workshops. He's actually a business partner of mine. We do leadership and sales workshops for those that are looking to improve the way they connect and improve the way they lead and sell.
That's a great story. Like from minimum wage to like now the sales you really hated and you didn't know what it was you were actually doing, and now you're teaching other people like how to be a great salesperson and be a leader as well. So yeah, that's a great achievement, to be honest. And so moving forward to like our topic, which is like a seeking story, before we touch on the leadership. So what is a actually seeking story is all about?
Yeah, I've got Mike and I and one other person. Storyseekers.us is the website. And the thing about story is that story has kind of become the new buzzword within the sales and leadership areas, right?
Yeah.
For leaders, leaders should have a good strategy story. Leaders should have a strategy, a story about this or about that. Leaders, I think, should have what I call an I am human story.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of the people that report to them or that they don't interact with on a daily basis get a little intimidated by leaders. So I think having an I am human story is wonderful. And if you're interested, I can tell you a great story about that in just a minute. But story seeking, it's about getting the other person's story. A lot of salespeople get really focused on what stories they should tell and why they should tell stories, which are important. The what and the why is very important. Well, we at StorySeekers.us, what Story Seekers talks about is, the reason you tell a story is to get the other person's story. That's why you tell a story. Yes, you want to give people information about you, about your company, about your products. However, the real key to story is, and that's why it's story seeking, I'm always seeking somebody else's story. How did they get to where they are? What is their problem? What are their issues? What are their challenges? How can they see what could they do differently, or what would life look like if they did do things differently, if they had certain capabilities? So being a story seeker is about getting the other person's story. So what makes us different is we not only talk about the what and the why, but we also talk about the how to tell stories and the when to tell stories. It's very crucial that you tell stories at the right time. I compare it to baking a cake, right?
Yeah.
If you're baking a cake and you don't put the right ingredients into that cake mix at the right time, or if you don't bake the cake at the right temperature, it doesn't matter if you've got the greatest ingredients in the world, it's still not going to taste very good.
It's true.
If you only bake a cake for 15 minutes at 200 degrees, it's not going to be done, right? You can't
Yeah.
pull it over and try to eat the cake at that point. And with story, it's the same thing. If I'm talking to somebody who's a prospective client, and I tell a story at the beginning about somebody who's like them, what we call a peer story.
Mm-hmm.
Can I tell you another story about if I'm working on a vice president of sales in an IT company?
Yeah.
Can I tell you I would ask, can I tell you very quickly, a very quick story about another vice president of IT we've worked with and the results they've got?
Yeah.
Well, that VP, they're going to say yes. Very few people, because of the way our brains are wired, almost never going to say no to a story. And so what happens in the brain when I say, Rosal, can I tell you a quick story? And you say yes, what we know which happens in the brain is you're going to sit back and say, I can sit back, I can relax, I'm safe, I don't have to do anything, but I better pay attention because something important might be said that I'm going to need to remember later on.
Mm-hmm.
And I always really emphasize this point because it's so important. Now think about this from the context of a leader trying to influence those people that are following him or her, or a salesperson trying to influence a buyer. When I say to you, can I tell you a quick story? What happens in your brain is your brain says to you, and you can't stop it. This is in human DNA.
Yeah.
It says, I'm safe, I can relax, I don't have to do anything, but I better pay attention because I might need to remember something important that's going to be said, or I might need later on in the conversation. I can't think of a better frame of mind to put somebody in to influence them. And so if you're a leader, and sales and leadership, sales is leadership to me. I mean, John Maxwell says that leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. Sales is influence, nothing more, nothing less. You have no authority card, right? You have no authority over your prospective client. So you tell that story, and the reason you tell that story is very quickly, 60 seconds. Hey, can I tell you about another vice president of IT that we worked with and the results they've gotten? Yes, 60-second story. Then when that 60 seconds is over, I'd say, Rosal, that's enough about them. Tell me what you've got going on here. So now you're going to tell a story. You're going to tell a little bit about your story. And
the problem you're having and everything, right?
Absolutely. And so now what we also teach is we teach a listening structure, a listening framework, so that you can get their story, and you can then, when they're done with that story, you give it back to them in a story format. Mm-hmm. And most of the time, if 99% of the time when I use this listening framework and I give somebody their story back, their response is this: how did you do that? You just took a story that I told in 10 minutes, 15 minutes. You boiled it down into 1 or 2 minutes, gave it back to me better than I gave it to you. And most importantly, you didn't miss anything. How'd you do that? And so listening, influence is in listening, not in talking. That's where influence really comes from. So as a leader, have stories that you can then, and get your employees' stories, get those that are following you, get their stories, get that connection, get that emotional connection. They're much more to follow you, because you've got to get people to volunteer to follow you, not do it over authority or just simply because you sign their paycheck. That's the lowest level of influence that there is. So that's what makes us at Story Seekers different. Is we talk the what and the why. Mm-hmm. We also talk of the how and the when, and how to listen, how to actively listen.
Yeah, that's how you can influence and also like know about the person, right? If you don't know the solution to the problem, let's say like you're trying to sell a consultation program or coaching program or like a waitlist program, you need to find like who you actually asking the question to. If some guy got six pack and they working out six times a day, just for an hypothetical example, and you're trying to sell them some kind of workout program you have. That guy already is a bodybuilder himself and he wouldn't buy it. So you have to ask them certain things. Probably he's wearing a baggy hoodies and you can't see the muscles and everything. But asking them question, and someone already doing like that desire goals and achievement, they don't really need like more clients, more customers, and trying to offering something else you're trying to do without asking them and knowing where they are, what the goals are. You wouldn't know like what type of products and they need and services need. And I can totally relate to that. One of the a guy I follow is Jason Sinek. I think he's a marketing guy. So he was a web design website company, and he went to sell his website design consultation for Berkshire Hathaway, like a Warren Buffett company. And they are, and after like he giving a quote about $5,000 for a website, and they just told him like, "Oh, go away! Like we don't need it." And that same website been built for like another company for $250,000. Because of the big of a company, he didn't ask for the revenue. He didn't ask for like what's the expectation and what brand value and everything, the logo they needed. Just because I didn't ask them question and didn't know their story behind it, he didn't know who Berkshire Hathaway was in the first place, and he didn't actually did his research, his homework, what company he's going after. He just give like $5,000 package. It doesn't really matter like it's $250,000 worth of website or $5,000 worth website. It just depend, like if you're trying to sell something to Facebook or like Amazon, is a software company, you don't sell it for like $100 of software. There'll be like millions they're talking about.
Right.
Otherwise they wouldn't talk to you, right? So you
Right.
need to know your target market and also need to know who they are, what's their value and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And asking questions, of course, is such an important part of it. What I caution, especially salespeople about on the questioning side of it is, there are especially new salespeople, beginning salespeople, they'll go in with a set list of 5, 6, 8, 10 questions.
Yeah.
I always caution against that, because what happens is we have what we call listening inhibitors.
Yeah.
And for instance, predicting what's going to be said, or just simply wanting to move through your list can be a listening inhibitor. For example, if I ask you the first question on my list as a new salesperson, what they do a lot of times is they ask the question and then they look at number 2 on their list. Yeah. And as their prospect is answering question 1, they're thinking to themselves, come on, hurry up, I got to get to question 2.
Yeah.
And it's a human, it's human nature. So it's very, very important to ask that first question, close the mouth, open the ears. And there have been times where I've gone into sales calls, I've asked the first question on my list, and I've not asked any other question that I had pre-prepared, because the answer to that first question led me and that client down roads that I had no idea, no clue what was going on inside their operation. And it then generated other questions that I asked off the cuff because of where the conversation went. So let the conversation dictate what questions. Yes, I'm all for having prepared questions. And like you said, doing your homework. And if you've done your homework, you've got some good questions. However, don't get tied into them saying, oh, I got to ask 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because my sales manager or my vice president of sales says I've got to ask all these questions. I advise sales leaders, don't get tied into that. You let the discovery process is tough enough. Don't make it any more difficult than it needs to be, and already is.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like you can see in my podcast, like I don't have anything scripted or anything like that. Other like a podcast host, they give like a questionnaires to their like guests, to like a question number one and two. That's how it can't really actually resonate with it. Like you're probably gonna give a few sentence answer, and then second question, it just all scripted. I don't really see the vibe. And the same thing like I do in the business world as well. I've been closing for sales like last 10 years myself on my business. I worked for like a Converges a sales company as well. I worked there for a couple of years. So I have the experience as well. So nothing is scripted, anything, it doesn't really work in the long term. If you want to build a human relationship with someone, it's like you rather give it to like a bot or like a computer. They can ask you them question, and if you want to like a human touch, you rather be like listening someone and asking the question according to the what they actually answered, right?
Absolutely. And that connection you're talking about is so important.
Yeah.
And can I tell you a quick story about a leader who I saw give a who I am or an I am human story?
Sure.
So was doing a workshop for 32 salespeople for a company in Dallas, Texas, a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And the vice president of sales, global telecommunications company, the vice president of sales, before we started on a Monday morning, he said, I just like, 10 or 15 minutes with the 32 salespeople from around the US and Canada that were in the room.
Yeah.
I just want 10, 15 minutes. And he proceeded to absolutely rip into these sales. I mean, he just crucified these salespeople. Your projections are terrible. You're putting things in the pipeline that aren't coming through. I'm getting in trouble with the CFO because our projections are off, and you're putting deals in the pipeline that aren't coming through. And he just, I leaned over to his executive assistant who was sitting next to me, and I said, "What's he doing? If I was, if I was sitting in the room, I'd be on Indeed.com, and my resume would be out there right now."
Yeah.
And she looked at me and she said 2 words. She said, "Just wait." I said, "Okay." So we went through the morning. We were just about to break for lunch, and the vice president of sales says, "Hey, I'd like 5 or 10 more minutes with the group." And I'm thinking, "Oh boy, here we go again," right? So he gets up and he stands up in front of the group, right in the middle of the group, and he pauses. And he lowers his voice and he slowed his speech down. And he said, "Hey, I know that I ask a lot out of everybody in this room. I ask a lot. And I want you to know why. See, I'm the youngest of 3 boys. I'm the youngest of 3 kids. And we grew up very, very poor. And I mean, we grew up poor. I did not wear a brand new stitch of clothing, and I mean any clothing that wasn't a hand-me-down, until I was 16 years old. And I vowed that I'm never living like that, and nobody that ever works with me is going to live like that. And that's why I ask so much of you people." And he's got tears coming out of the corner of his eyes, and I'm like, I'll walk through fire for the, where was this guy this morning, right? Why do you have his twin brother give the speech this morning? Because it's the same looking guy, but a different. And see, this is why he asked so much out of his people. And this is why his executive assistant said to me, "Just wait." See, he was very high demanding, but there was a very good reason, and a good reason why. And that story made him human with the rest of his crew. And that's another reason, the biggest reason in my mind, why they would walk through fire for that guy.
Yeah, it's so true, isn't it? Like without knowing like behind that where they come from, you don't know like why the person is behaving that way they are, right? If someone come through like a poverty like that, then obviously they're gonna value their money, how is it going, and they're gonna appreciate every single penny is going to us, everything, right? In a sales or business, like a business would be the baby, because coming through like a poverty, unless you've been hungry for 3 days, you wouldn't know what hunger is, right? You need to live in India, Africa, and experience it yourself in the hottest country. You wouldn't understand it, like what hot actually is. Same thing.
Well, and it's really funny because I tell people, frequently, well, I've been working since I've been 14 years old, and they look at me and they say, "Come on, you've been working. I've been putting in this. You want to see my Social Security statement? I've been putting into Social Security in the United States since I've been 14 years old." When I worked in broadcasting, there were 2 weeks where I lived on macaroni and cheese, Kraft macaroni and cheese, and peanut butter and saltine crackers I mean, when you're starting out, you sometimes you have to do those things, but it surely makes you appreciate what you got now.
Yeah.
And leaders, and especially leaders, when they can tell those kind of stories like this gentleman did, when they can tell those kind of stories and show the vulnerability to do that. And that's a very important part, both for leaders and for salespeople, to be a little bit, nobody's perfect. I don't know of anybody who's ever been alive on this earth who's been the perfect person. So, nobody's perfect. People make mistakes. And the best thing you can do is learn from those mistakes and then show other people how that mistake has helped you learn, and help them learn and not make the same mistake, so that they don't have to learn by making their mistakes. They learn from other people's mistakes.
Yeah, totally agree with you. And yeah, it's so important for like us to learn from the mistakes and keep moving forward with it, right? We just keep on dwelling on it and just making a complaint. So yeah, let's focus on another side of the topic, which is like a leadership and influencing. So how do you make someone like a better leader and influencer? Like, do you think like leaders are born, or do you think like leaders can be created with the right guidance, training programs?
I like to joke that, when somebody says our leaders born, when they ask me that question, I get asked that a lot. Are there born leaders? Well, or are leaders born? Well, I haven't met a leader yet who hasn't been born. But are they developed? Yes, leaders are developed. And leaders are developed by, there's plenty of programs. I teach a lot of John Maxwell's leadership theories and leadership practices. But leaders are those that develop themselves, that say, hey, you know what? I have to continually get better. I have to continually, I'm a big believer in servant leadership. Hey, I say to leaders, and some of them like this, some of them don't. So when I say, here, you want to prove to yourself who should be or who's most important in your organization. Let's say you have 100 employees.
Yeah.
And you, as the leader of that company, the president, the CEO, you got 100 employees. Don't show up for work tomorrow, Mr. President. Just don't show up. Call in sick. See what happens to your organization. Nah, what do you think is going to happen to your organization if you don't show up? You're sick tomorrow. They say, well, you know what? These people will take care of things, and they'll, things will move on. I'll come back the day after tomorrow and, pick things right up. Exactly. Now, let me ask you a question. What happens if all 100 of those people call in sick tomorrow? What happens to your company? Are you kidding me? I'm toast. I'm done. I mean, the phones don't get answered. Customers don't get service. Sales don't get made. Exactly. So who's there to serve who? Be there to be a servant leader to your people. Grow your company by growing your people. The best way to grow a company is to grow your people, and a leader needs to grow right along with them. And that's, I think, what a good leader does. So you can take people who have there are some people who have better intuitive leadership qualities than others. However, you can grow leaders, and the best way to grow your company is to grow those people who show initiative, who show leadership qualities, might be a little rough around the edges, maybe don't have the experience. You put them through some programs, and you put them on a personal development program where they can grow into those positions. And really, you want loyal employees. You want employees that are going to stay and be with you and be loyal to the company. You show interest in making sure that they grow, that they're going to be able to move up, that they're going to be able to continue to grow into bigger and better things and more responsibility, and yes, increased pay. When you can provide them that path and show them that, tell them that story, how that story is going to play out over their career at your company, that's when you've got something. And that's how leaders approach things, and they develop themselves, and then they develop the people around them.
Yeah, definitely. People just mirror someone, right? We follow like social media influencers, wherever, like people in a great position like Elon Musk, Amazon Jeff Bezos. They're like a great leader, and their team members, everyone mirroring them. Even though like a small business owners, they trying to mirror them, like how they're doing things, what's their morning routine like, how they treat their people, their employees. So obviously, like you mentioned, like if a CEO of the director of the company doesn't show up to the work, then everyone's in the organization, they're gonna behave same way. This our boss is chilled out, then we should take it off, or he's not gonna bother. So even though no 150 employees doesn't show up, even though like 10% of the, right, there's so many
Yep.
people compared to one person, and 10% of the 15 people of the organization not showing up, there is how disruptive it will be, like your organization, like generating revenue, sales, customer service, so many aspects of the businesses. So I totally agree
Absolutely.
with you, like a
People are
leader need to
watching.
lead forward, right, and they have
Yeah,
to show like your team, you working for them rather than they working for you, right?
you're working exactly, because the fact of the matter is people are watching all the time. They're watching your actions. And if your words and your actions are incongruent,
Yeah.
they're gonna believe your actions. They're not gonna believe your words. For example, I told you I'm gonna show up today to record this podcast at this time on this date. Well, if I didn't show up today, obviously you're going to believe my actions and not my words. So it's the same for a leader. If a leader says, hey, you know what, you got to work hard, you got to do these things, you got to put your nose to the grindstone, and the leader's coming in at 10:30 in the morning and taking an hour and a half lunch and then leaving for the day at 3:30, sorry, your words are incongruent with your actions, and your people are not going to follow, right? You have to influence them to follow them. And if you want them to go over and above, then your words and your actions have got to be.
Yeah, so true. Like we always like let's say a leader works 12 hours a day and the employee works in 8 hours a day. They're gonna focus on, right, how I'm gonna maximize my 8 hours a day, right? Because my leader is my CEO, my manager, CFO, they work in 12 hours. I'm just trying to my best for my version on them 8 hours. But if you're like working 2 3 hours a day and you just expect them to work 8 hours a day, that's not gonna be sufficient. Like they'll be like, oh, he's laid back, then I'd rather be laid back and just copying you something like that.
And great leaders see things before others. They see farther than others do. They see things happening. They see the big picture first before others do.
Yeah.
And I worked for a gentleman who was a great leader. I thought he was a great leader. There was one time in the office that I worked in, he was a stay late guy. So he was always there till 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night sometimes. Mm-hmm. And if you stayed late, you called his office to let him know that you were in the building.
Yeah.
Because of the alarm system. He didn't want to set the alarm system on somebody. So I called him. There's an event coming up. I called him 3 nights in a row. And I said, hey, I'm staying late tonight. 3 nights in a row. So on the 4th day, he saw me in the hallway and he looked at me and said, hey, you go home at 5 o'clock tonight. And I said, what? He said, you go home at 5 o'clock tonight. I know we got a big event coming up, but you spent the last 3 nights here late. I want you to go home, spend some time with your family. See, he's thinking big picture. He's thinking, hey, we got this event coming up. Yeah, I got it. I trust that you're going to get it done. You don't have, but I don't want you to also have your family suffer. That's a servant leader. That's a leader who is seeing things, who's saying, you know what, I don't want this guy getting burnt out. I don't want his wife and kids saying, I never see my dad or my husband. He understood that. And so he was very adamant that I go home at 5 o'clock that night. And so that's what good and great leaders do. They see further than others do. They see more than others do. They have a longer range vision than others do. And that's part of what makes them a great leader.
Yeah, they care about their people, don't they? So Rob, we are coming to the end of this podcast. It was great talking to you and having a discussion. So those who's listening to this podcast episode, if anyone wants to reach out to you, learn more about your work, your business, what's the best place to find you?
Best way to find me is either at storyseekers.us. That's storyseekers, SEEKERS.us. They can also connect with me on LinkedIn, Rob Stenberg, STENBERG. Connect with me on LinkedIn, and or they can send me an email at rob.stenberg@storyseekers.us. That's Rob, ROB.Stenberg, STENBERG, at storyseekers.us.
Thank you so much, Rob, for your time. Really appreciate it. I wish you best of luck for your business and your career and your life as well. I hope you have a wonderful day ahead.
I appreciate you having me, and I hope you have a wonderful day as well. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. The pleasure is mine. So that's a wrap, guys. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast episode. You know how to find Rob. Go check out his website and also find him on a LinkedIn as well if anyone wants to work with him or reach out to him and learn more about his company as well. So yeah, till then, talk to you in the next episode. Stay safe, stay healthy. Bye.